Hello everyone, my name is Achila Yona and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And if you're new here, then just welcome. Since you are new, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the bell button to get notified when I upload a new video because you do not want to miss the content I am bringing to you, baby, okay? So this video was inspired by me just doing a simple YouTube search and I came across these so-called black people taking a DNA ancestry test and sharing their results. And like I talk about plenty of times on this channel, y'all, what do I always tell y'all? DNA ancestry tests cannot prove your origins. And so many people have a hard time digesting that. And we're going to go over why DNA ancestry tests are unreliable and inaccurate. But first, I want to talk about Black American origins. Now, since I am a indigenous YouTuber, okay, I don't like using paper genocidal terms to label myself. And although the terms that we may use today are terms of paper genocide, I always encourage my audience to refer to themselves as their tribal names, okay? And this is where a lot of confusion come into play for Black American people because a lot of Black American people actually do know what tribes they come from. They just don't like the answer, okay? And you're probably like, Leona, no, don't. Yes, I'm going there. A lot of Black people are denying their ancestry out of self-hate.
You'll just never understand, will you?
Understand what, baby?
That my place is here, with my people.
Melanie, what help could you possibly be to these people while you're living hand to mouth on a file clerk's check?
But at least I'm here, in day-to-day contact with my people. Instead of being like you and Daddy and sitting over in Linden Hills with a terminal case of middle-class amnesia.
You don't have to live in the slums to care, Melanie. You don't have to try to be something you're not.
Oh, God, I can't stand this. Trying to be something I'm not? Trying to be proud of my African heritage? If that's being something I'm not, then fine. But I'd rather be dead than be like you. Stuck-up who's ashamed of being black.
My grandmother was a full-blooded Iroquois. My grandfather was a black from a long line of journeymen who lived in Connecticut since the establishment of the colonies. My father was a Bajan who came to this country a cabin boy in a merchant marina.
I know all of that, Mama.
Then know this. I am alive because of the blood of a people who never scraped or begged or apologized for what they were. They asked only one thing of this world: to be allowed to be. And I learned through the blood of these people that black isn't beautiful. It isn't ugly. It isn't kinky hair. It isn't straight hair. Black is just black. It broke my heart when you changed your name. I gave you my grandmother's name, a woman who bore 9 children and educated them all. Who held off 6 white men with a shotgun when they tried to drag one of her sons off to jail for not knowing his place. And you had to reach into an African dictionary to find a name that would make you proud. What I brought my babies home from the hospital, I swore to whatever gods would listen that I would use everything I had or could get so that my children would be prepared to meet this world on its own terms, so that no one could make them ashamed of what they were or how they looked, whatever they were, however they looked. And Melanie, that's not white or red or black or purple. That's being a mother.
This is a reality for many Black American people. And yes, I have to address this before I go deeper into this video because a lot of people are mistaken when it comes to identity. They are mistaken when it comes to genealogy. They are mistaken when it comes to genetic ancestry testing. And we're going to be talking about all those things in this video. But first, I have to say that a lot of Black American people can trace their ancestry to Indigenous American tribe. They just don't want to believe it. And obviously, I'm not talking to the Black foreigners who just got here because if you are not aware, in recent years, 3.8 million Black foreigners live in the United States. And although most are from the Caribbean, Africans drive recent growth. So obviously, we have other kinds of Black people around us who have different ethnic backgrounds and racial backgrounds and different cultural backgrounds. And we're getting a clash of these different tastes of cultures. And of course, we're seeing people go back and forth talking about Black unity and stuff, but that's why we are seeing Black people from all different racial backgrounds being put into a melting pot. And that's why it's so hard for melanated people to self identify, to learn their genealogy, to learn their ancestry because of how the colonizers label us and identify us. And yes, this needs to be said too. Black American people have undergone large amounts of paper genocide. And paper genocide is the act of reclassifying indigenous people as a different race. And this doesn't only affect us, this affects melanated indigenous people around the world. The fact that we are labeled and called Black, that is paper genocide right there in front of your eyes. And if you don't know, Black itself is a misnomer. It is a misnomer. It's not a real identity. And so a lot of Black people are hiding behind misnomers, thinking that it it shows who they truly are, and it doesn't. And that's why I always tell people, what tribe do you come from? Oh, you don't want to say what tribe you come from because it's an indigenous tribe? Well, why do you think you don't want to claim to be indigenous? Is it because you think being indigenous is about having straight black hair with light skin? Because if that's how you think, I suggest you deprogram and reprogram your mind, baby. Because not all indigenous people look alike. And as a matter of fact, we have all now been made aware that there were quote unquote Black people in the Americas prior to Columbus. And we have been seeing this in drawings. We have been seeing this with the depictions of the Mayan murals. And remember, they painted those pictures of themselves. They painted themselves as that. So there's nothing to argue here. But the people who are trying to argue with us about our ancestry and how to trace our ancestry are people who are trying to benefit off of us monetarily. And what I mean by that is when it comes to Black American people, we have a large amount of spending power. Okay, we spend trillions of dollars a year on communities that have nothing to do with us. Okay, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But Black foreigners, they know that. They are made aware of that. And so I want y'all to understand that when they are targeting us with Pan Africanism, when they are targeting us with back to Africa movement and all the other stuff, it's to get our money. It has nothing to do really with our identity. And although some Black people may be African due to what slavery or recent immigration, wherever the case may be, you got to do your genealogy. But however it is, they're painting a picture stating that all Black people come from Africa, and that's not true. And if you want to try and debate me with the out of Africa theory, the out of Africa theory has been debunked plenty of times. The fact that we have a 11.5 million year old remains, skeletal remains here in South America. Her name is Lucia. All right. And when you Google her, they're going to say she is uh, 11,500 years old, but she's actually 11.5 million years old in the original article that they stated. So you have to ask yourself, if the out of Africa theory pertains to all of us, then how is Lucia older than Lucy? And she is not like an ape because Lucia looks like a person. She looks like a quote unquote African person. She look like a quote unquote melanated Pacific Islander, okay? And that's what scientists say she look like. So, but you have to put all these things into perspective when it comes to Black American identity. We are now aware that Black immigrants have been moving over here, but a lot of people are not aware that Indigenous Americans were sent to Africa as slaves and laborers. Yes, that is right. Indigenous Americans were sent to Africa if they were troublesome and also to build up the labor that they needed in Africa to build up their agriculture.
Well, I think the main point is to fill in a gap that has developed because of the suppression of knowledge of the interaction of Black people and Native American people. In other words, it's to tell the story to the fullest extent possible of the interrelations between these two ethnic groups with both extremely rich heritages of culture and history.
Where were the Native American population during the time that you studied?
Well, during that time period, I think virtually all areas of the Americas and all of the islands, virtually, including up to Greenland, for the most part, were occupied by different native people. So the entire continent and virtually all of the islands were occupied. The Spanish writer Bartolomé de las Casas, who is the principal author of that gives us the information from Columbus's diaries. Columbus chose to finance the conquest of the West Indies by selling Native American slaves, and he characterized it as his granjeria, or granary. In other words, it was the granary that was going to pay for the conquest, that is, Native American bodies. And Columbus himself sent at least 3,000 and possibly as many as 6,000 or more Native American slaves to Europe. This begins as early as 1493. On his return voyage, he takes about 24 Native Americans to Portugal and Spain. In the subsequent voyages, many, many more are sent, men and women. Now, he intends to sell them by the thousands, not only in Spain, but he mentions the Azores, the Canary Islands, the Cape Verde Islands off, the west coast of Africa.
Not only that, but there are Africans coming out and talking about how their ancestral origins, how their tribal origins actually originated outside of Africa.
It's the knowledge he's going to talk about today to share with the world.
muy xam-xam boo xam ne mu ngi wàcc jëm ci wàllu lébu.
And this knowledge is came from the Lebus community.
ndax lébu dañu am culture bu mag.
And the Lebus, they have a big culture.
am cosaan bu mag.
And they have a big tradition.
am diine aussi.
And also they have a religion.
kon kenn warul waxtaanee lébu rek nga ñëw rek commencé Sénégal parce que lébu commencé wul Sénégal.
So it doesn't mean, for example, if you're talking about Lebu, you cannot only start in Senegal, because Lebu doesn't come from Senegal.
parce que suñu maam yi dañuy wax ne lébu mu ngi commencé Inde.
Because his ancestors, they said Lebu is came from India.
parce que lébu yi dëkkoon nañu Inde.
Because the Lebu, they used to live in India.
suñu maam yi nee nañu lébu yi def nañu 1000 ans en Inde.
And his ancestors, they said the Lebus, they stay in India for 1,000 years.
So you have to ask yourself, why aren't genetic ancestry test companies talking about this? And it's because they don't want to. It's all about the money with them. When it comes to Black American identity, people cash out on it big time. And I hate to say it, I'm sorry, you guys, but they are exploiting Black American people with DNA ancestry tests. You cannot prove your origins with DNA ancestry tests.
Auditorium like 75,000 people or something, and she announced that she just had the test and that she was Zulu. So it broke on CNN. I was sitting in my living room minding my own business and said, Oprah Winfrey's a Zulu. So I called Rick Kittles, and I said, Rick, did you tell Oprah she was a Zulu? He goes, no, man, she made that up herself. It's a true story. It's a true story. I would lie to make you laugh, but I'm telling you a true story. So I said, Rick, are you in your lab? He said, yeah. I said, is anybody there? He said, no. I said, when the results come in, make her Zulu, man. I said, you back there making it up anyway. Nobody believe you can take some spit and figure out a tribe? What, are you crazy?
There is an article written by several scientists, including Kimberly Tallbear. She is a Native American woman who is a scientist who speaks out about the dangers of DNA ancestry tests. And in the article, they mention how African American communities are supporting African communities because of these genetic ancestry tests, and how people are using genetic ancestry tests to challenge tribal membership councils so they can get financial support, health care, whatever else that comes with tribal enrollment in American Indian tribes. The article goes on to say consumers often purchase these tests to learn about their race or ethnicity, but there is no clear cut connection between an individual's DNA and his or her racial or ethnic affiliation. Worldwide patterns of human genetic diversity are weakly correlated with racial and ethnic categories because both are partially correlated with geography. Current understandings of race and ethnicity reflect more than genetic relatedness, though having been defined in particular socio-historical contexts, for example, European and American colonialism. In addition, social relationships and life experiences have been as important as biological ancestry in shaping individual identity and group membership. The article also goes on to say many genetic ancestry tests also claim to tell consumers where their ancestral lineage originated in the social group to which their ancestors belonged. However, present day patterns of residence are rarely identical to what existed in the past, and social groups have changed over time in name and composition. Databases of present day samples may therefore provide false leads. What people fail to realize, and I would say this time and time again, genealogy is the key to researching your genealogy. Like, if you want to know more about your ancestry, you have to do your genealogy research. That's the only thing that's really gonna hold up and be proof for you. Records, like vital records, birth certificates, so on and so forth, they can be proved in court. But however, you can't use DNA ancestry tests to join a tribe. Now, however, DNA ancestry tests and DNA paternity slash DNA maternity tests are not the same thing. One of them is to find this ancestry, which, let me remind you, we all have over 1 million ancestors. So already out the gate, for it to claim that it can find these ancestors, it's a little suspicious because we all have over 1 million ancestors. And how do you know a million of them? And I don't. Okay, I don't. Because remember, DNA ancestry tests only test 0.01% of your DNA. What about the other 99.9%? Okay, and with DNA paternal or maternal tests, that's to find out who the biological parent is. And yes, I get y'all guys all the time saying, well, I used the DNA ancestry test and I was able to find my long lost cousin and my long lost mom. Babe, that's because y'all both willingly spit into a tube and sent your DNA into a database, and they were able to make that distinction and connection there. It's because you did that, not because they did that. And also, let's talk about that too, because not a lot of people are aware of the dangers of what these DNA ancestry test companies are doing with DNA. Because, first of all, they are cashing out big time with selling your DNA and your personal information to big pharmaceutical companies. Now, that not may not seem like a big deal, but aren't they always coming out with new diseases each and every year? We had swine flu, we had Ebola, now we got the corona, okay? And not only is that happening, because best believe they are using our genetics to use biochemical engineering weapons on us and all that other stuff. And if you don't believe that, then you're not paying attention. Anywho, not only that, but also police officers have been hounding these DNA ancestry test companies to give up the goods, to give up the DNA samples they have gotten from people who sent their DNA tests to these companies. These police officers are petitioning um, judges to hand over DNA to them because they're getting hints off of your DNA. That's right, that they got from these DNA ancestry test companies. And guess what? You can get arrested. You can be falsely arrested because you are related to a criminal. And if you may not be related to them, you may be, but guess what? Now you're spending large amounts of money, spending uh, large amounts of time trying to clear your name of a crime that you did not commit. And best believe it is happening, it's already happening to people. So you have to be aware of who you are giving your DNA to and what they are doing with it, because they're selling your information and making money off of it. And not only that, some of them are willingly letting these pharmaceutical companies and these police officers just take your DNA. You have to do your genealogy if you want the answers. Okay, because these scientists, they're not going to tell you the full truth. They don't even want to talk about the American Indian and African connection. Because even though on this channel, I'm more so focused on indigenous history, but speaking about the ties indigenous people had with Africans, that's also indigenous history too. Indigenous people, we were international. We still are international. And those are things that are important and are of significance when it comes to tracing your ancestry. And a lot of people think that they can trace their ancestry with a DNA ancestry test, and that's just not it. That's just not the way to go. Like, I'm sorry. And to top it off, to add salt to the wound, they actually was able to crack down an indigenous scam using dog saliva. And I know you're like, what? Yes. See for yourself.
Inside this store in Montreal, a man is planning to break the law to make a point. He's invited us to watch as long as his identity is hidden. What he's buying doesn't matter. It's the savings he's trying to score at the cash that he wants us to see.
Oh, yeah. You take my Indian card?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, okay.
The cashier thinks she has just been handed what's known as an Indian status card, an official government document. She removes the taxes without catching on that it's not the real thing.
It was $8.20 without tax, but if you paid full price, it was $9.60, I think.
The savings are tiny, just $1.
Shit. I'm coming back. I forgot my money.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Okay,
Well,
just
when
put
you
that
come
on the
back,
side.
you just have to show me.
Okay, thanks.
We walk before a transaction is completed, so no laws are broken.
Merchants don't know the laws, so they'll take anything that's, being presented to them.
These men are blowing the whistle on a group they used to belong to. They say the group's members are getting tax breaks they're not entitled to by using almost look-alike Indian status cards.
I know somebody that do some renovation.
The
on his
renovation.
house.
I don't want to mention the name.
Yeah, saved over 35 grand in taxes.
Here's what an actual government-issued status card looks like. Those with status can be entitled to a range of benefits, including tax exemptions. Now this is the card being passed off to unsuspecting shopkeepers. In a hurry, you can see how it could be taken as the real thing.
The Mohawk Council of Kahnawake election law meeting takes place tonight at 6.
And that is causing real problems here, 20 minutes south of Montreal. On the reserve of 8,000 people, the Mohawks of Kahnawake. What you have to know about them is they won a rare victory to use their status cards at a range of stores in Quebec, not just on reserve.
These are all fake cards, every single one of them.
It was working well, until the look-alike cards started showing up.
If you look at the cards, they're pretty well done.
That's when the local police, known as the Peacekeepers, got involved.
That's a fake card, and that's a real card.
They're getting calls because shopkeepers are confused and suspicious.
This is happening quite a bit. And for us, for people in our community and other Native communities who have a legitimate right to receive goods tax-free, we fear that it will impact their rights somewhere down the road.
Dwayne Zachary is the chief peacekeeper, says his team have confiscated roughly 100 cards and that transactions occurred daily.
So you're afraid that because some people are committing fraud, you're going to end up paying?
Of course.
In a way, it's already happening. Real cards are being turned away.
Somebody is making this happen. Somebody is giving them the hope that they have these rights. Somebody's giving them the means to commit these crimes. My feeling is that these associations, whoever they are, whoever's in charge, are the catalysts for all of this.
So where do these cards come from? Many, he says, from the Confederation of Aboriginal People of Canada. Sounds official, but the Assembly of First Nations doesn't recognize it. Neither does the Government of Canada. For the people in this community hall in Quebec, though, all Confederation members, the group is legitimate, and Guillaume Carl is their leader. Titles and the appearance of prestige seem to matter to Carl. He insists his membership voted to refer to him as His Excellency or Grand Chief. His sons are the leaders of the youth wings. And he says there are 50,000 members nationally and a few hundred in Gatineau. But he blames the poor turnout this day on our cameras.
Anybody against this resolution?
This is a man emboldened by the people around him.
The motion is carried unanimously.
After a meeting about new positions in the group, he agreed to sit and talk.
Are your members led to believe that in using your cards that they can get tax exemptions in certain circumstances?
No, because it goes way beyond that.
People don't try to
Do you
use
think
these
people
cards
get
for
the
tax
card here for
exemptions?
taxes?
I have no idea. But I do know that the GENEALOGY are claiming that they have seized those cards because
Illegally.
people have been trying
Illegally.
to use them for tax
And you know what?
exemptions.
When they seize it, the guy comes and gets another card. Our card is not a tax card. Our card is a card for your identification.
Where would members get the idea that their ID card might be something they could pull out at a store for tax breaks? We'd been curious about that for a while. So weeks earlier, an associate producer contacted the Confederation as a would-be member, not a journalist.
How far away is St. Paul Road?
She was directed to someone just outside Ottawa. Our crew headed off with hidden cameras.
Hi.
The representative is described as the vice grand chief of the Confederation.
Come on in. But that's the application that we have to send, and it's $80 for 2 years. So that's the card.
Before long, the conversation turns to the cards. Using it for tax savings is no secret here.
Walmart, Canadian Tire, Home Hardware. You know, if they don't just say, well, this is my card. This is my Indian status. If they don't,
Following that advice would be against the law. It's fraud. The stores that take off tax improperly, if caught, will eventually have to reimburse the government.
So what do you do when you go to pay? You just give them the card first, and then they just remove the
Walmart,
tax?
they're very fussy. So you have to give them their card, the card, and they punch numbers and things like that, and automatically it's the tax is reduced.
That's it?
How do you feel about that?
I disagree with that. That's obviously not the opinion of the Confederation. It's the opinion of my vice chief.
Where did she make a mistake? What is it that she said
made
that's the
15
mistake?
mistakes, right? She is junior. She's a nice person, but she's junior enough to not know what she's talking about.
He doesn't elaborate, but we've followed up with the representative who says everything she explained on that hidden camera conversation was what she was told by the Confederation. She also says she believed the cards were official.
Why not tell your members, don't use these cards for tax exemptions?
Because I'm not their father or mother.
The Government of Canada does not recognize this card as being legitimate for tax exemptions, period.
That's their opinion.
The way he sees it, the Constitution is on his side.
Article 15 says equality in front of the law. If you're allowed to do something, I should be allowed to do something too. The same thing. You can't discriminate against me, and you can't say that because I don't live on a reserve, I can't hunt, I can't fish, I have to pay taxes.
Bottom line for Carl, he insists his members should get their rights because they are Indigenous. But are they?
You can have only 1%, and you are.
So you can join if you only have 1%.
Oh, yeah.
Carl told us about 90% of his members pass a DNA test. And indeed, in that hidden camera meeting, there was a $250 test.
Do you ever have people take the DNA test and they just come back non-native? Like, is that common, or?
I never saw it so far because we just started.
Carl's DNA tests are done through a Canadian company called Vigard Acumetrics, and this company claims that through its testing kit, its results can not only help determine the percentage of Native ancestry in your DNA, but that these results can also help you to receive a status card. The thing is, the Government of Canada doesn't recognize these sorts of DNA results as an indicator of Indigenous status.
We thought we'd try to see how accurate Vigard's results are nonetheless. 3 colleagues agreed to help and let us test to see if they have any Indigenous DNA.
I'd be shocked if that test discovers anything else but Russia.
He was born in Russia, the other 2 in India, and they're pretty sure the answer will be 0 Indigenous ancestry. We follow Vigard's instructions to the letter, then send off the samples. Within a few weeks, the results are back, and they're a surprise.
Okay, so the results are in. This is yours, this is yours. Have a look.
Okay.
What have you got there?
I've got 20% Native American ancestry, 12% Abenaki, and 8% Mohawk.
I'm exactly the same.
Me too.
12 and 8.
Surprising, to say the least.
This is the sort of anomaly that needs an explanation.
Okay.
So we went to Simon Gravel in the Department of Human Genetics at McGill University.
Is it possible to tell if someone has indigenous ancestry from their DNA?
Yes, it's absolutely possible. It's not the same as saying whether someone is or is not Native American, as a question of identity, but we can tell very well whether somebody has, for example, a lot of Native relatives.
What are the chances that these three very different people have exactly the same percentage of Native American ancestry right down to the band?
Yeah, extremely unlikely. Like, how much faith do I put in these reports? I would say personally, none.
We asked Vigard to explain these results. It told us many people find themselves in the range of 20% indigenous ancestry. It also says the test we bought was just for information. To be legally valid, it would have to be done by a trained healthcare professional, one who wears latex gloves and a mask.
So did you say you're trained to do it? Is that the idea?
Yeah.
So what,
Guillaume Carl insists the tests done for the Confederation are legally valid, conducted only by trained testers. But just take a look at the DNA swab they did for our associate producer in that hidden camera footage. No gloves. He even appears to touch the swab before putting it in her mouth.
In any way, does this call into question the legitimacy, in your mind, of anyone in your membership?
No.
He is unyielding. But so are the voices from the Ganawaki Reserve, where frustration with Carl and his group is building.
They tell us that they have ancestry, they've done the DNA tests. They tell us sometimes that they're probably more Native than we are. Sometimes it feels like a slap in the face.
And government officials told CBC they have advised Carl to stop distributing cards that resemble certificates of Indian status. He says he won't.
Do you find it amazing that the government hasn't come after you in some way? Or the
No,
police
because they
haven't?
won't, they're not going to win.
Far from being contrite, Guillaume Carl seems primed for a fight. He has his members and his story, and so far, he has his way.
So, Ian, Indigenous Services Canada tells us that it's been contacted by a few agencies on this matter. So, the Canada Revenue Agency, Sûreté de Québec, and the RCMP, and that it's cooperating with them on their own investigations, and that it has retained a third party, to review some of these allegations. And there is a report on those expected probably by the end of this month.
So 3 of our colleagues, 2 born in India, 1 born in Russia, all came up with exactly the same DNA profile and a significant percentage of indigenous ancestry.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a little odd. On the advice of some DNA experts at the time, when we did that swab, we did other swabs and sent them to another large company that also does DNA ancestry, and they came back with results that were very different, that were very much in line with the stories these people understand about their own histories. So, there is still a lot to be explained.
And before I go, I really want y'all to ask ourselves, how is it that you can't join an American Indian tribe in the United States with a DNA ancestry test, right? Because you need your genealogy records. And if a tribe was to accept a test, it's more than to see if you're related to that tribal member rather than taking a DNA ancestry test, because they're not going to look at the ancestry test. They're going to want to see if you actually related to the person you're claiming to be related to. So ask yourself, how is it that American Indian nations, you would need documentation, you would need genealogy. They don't accept DNA ancestry tests, but yet in order for me to become a citizen of this African country, all I need is a DNA ancestry test. Really think about that. Really ponder on that, you guys, because not a lot of Black people are aware of paper genocide. Not a lot of Black people are aware of the lengths colonizers went through to reclassify and to really subjugate us and put us into a different category so they won't have to pay out. And honestly, that's what it is. that's what it is when it comes to Black American ancestry. They were not going to leave a long enough paper trail for us because they know if we start looking at them documents and we start seeing them documents saying Indian, we're going to come back and go to court and take them to court and get back what is ours. And colonizers don't want that. So it's no surprise for them to push genetic ancestry testing on us because for a long time, colonizers have been having to use theories and stories to tell the story of our people. But yet, when it comes to us telling our own story, we're always silenced. We're always seen as self haters or incompetent. So, really think about that and ponder on that. So, tell me, y'all guys' thoughts in the comment section below. And tell me if y'all took a DNA ancestry test. Tell me what it said. Tell me what your percentages are and what you feel about them. So yeah, I didn't make this video to be like Africans versus Indigenous Americans or whatever, because obviously there's a long history between the two of us, but someone's not being truthful about it. So you got to do the research yourself, babes. Speaking of research, if you want to learn more about paper genocide, purchase my book, Discovering Genealogy. I talk more about paper genocide, Black American history, American Indian history, and even how to research your genealogy, even if you're adopted. So definitely check that out. And again, thanks again for watching this whole long video. I didn't mean to make it that long, but I had to really prove a point here. And people need to know that with genetic ancestry tests, they can't prove your origins to begin with. So obviously, it's not going to prove your quote unquote African origins either. So, but anyway, y'all have a good one. And until the next time, bye.